Alright guys, so I want to do another follow-up video to Bill Nye's episode on overpopulation. And I talked in my previous video about a conversation that I had at work where there were people arguing that if we only had 1 million people in the world, then overpopulation wouldn't be a problem. And I said I think the woolly mammoths would beg to differ. Along with a number of other species of megafauna. So it's not, what I argued is that it's not about the amount of resources we have versus the population size, it's about how you use those resources. Because, the same plot of land can grow 5 times, 10 times, 50 times as much crops if you use it properly. So it's not about the amount of resources you have, it's about how you use them. And one way to emphasize this is there's a thought experiment that you could take the entire population of the world, let's say 7 billion people for right now. I don't know what the current estimate is. I think it's somewhere between 7 and 8 billion people. But let's just say 7 billion people. And if you don't like that, then, go ahead and use 8 billion. Go ahead and use 10 billion for all I care. Because the math will work out in a similar way. You could theoretically move this entire population to Texas and still use your resources plentifully. Now, how does this thought experiment work? Now, I'll put the disclaimer out there. This thought experiment is controversial and does have some problems with it. Sorry, I'm still getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. But basically, if you were to move everybody to Texas and you had, say, 12-story apartment buildings, you could have enough living space for everybody. But then you need to have farms. Now, it's interesting that farming is actually more efficient if you do it inside of buildings. So you could build buildings with farms inside and provide enough food for the entire world. Well, what about energy? Bill Nye argued that, you have this overpopulation and, it's going to create climate change and this and that and the other. Why aren't we using nuclear energy? See, I see people who are very progressive, as they like to call it, or very liberal, and they want to talk about using wind and solar power to replace fossil fuels, replace coal. And while that's a noble desire, it's not reality. It's not real life. It's a fantasy. It's like trying to replace the power grid with bicycles hooked up to a generator. Well, at least then people would be doing work. The reality is we don't have a good alternative to fossil fuels besides nuclear energy. And if we did use nuclear energy, you could have this population Texas exist. So you could have 7, 8 billion people all living in Texas, all being fed, all being housed, and all having enough energy to survive and live pretty good lives. And for that matter, clean water, that's one of the biggest resources that we need in the world. If you were using nuclear power, you could take seawater, desalinate it, use that for farming, filter it, use it for drinking water. So there'd be plenty of water. The main limiting resource in the world today is energy. And the reason it's the main limiting resource is because people are afraid of nuclear power. But anyway, so like I said, the theoretical, or the thought experiment, I should say, of moving the entire world to Texas is, it's an idea that exists in it is what it is. I mean, nobody wants to move the entire population to Texas because it wouldn't be practical. And it would not be practical. It would be very expensive. And it just, why? Why put all your eggs in one basket? As it is, we should be focusing on moving the human race beyond Earth. We should be focusing on establishing colonies on Mars. But, so putting all the human population in Texas would be far worse than putting all our eggs in one basket, which we already have. But anyway, thanks for watching this video.